probably half the people or all the people listening don't know what the hell we're talking about.
This is probably the worst idea we've ever had.
The only thing good from Sweden is Zlatan.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Slightly Sideways Podcast, Episode 2. I'm your host, Koenig, joined as always by my co-host, Corbin. Say hello to the people, Corbin.
Hello, world. Hope everybody is having a great week. And as always, we are so pleased to have you with us for another episode of Slightly Sideways.
We've made a few exciting additions to the podcast since last week. We have an opening theme now. We've got a logo, and I guess that means this is a slightly serious thing now. Corbin, could you give a shout out to the people responsible for assisting us with the brand?
Absolutely. So we're so fortunate to have friends that can help us with things like this to help better our product. First of all, with the intro, the guitar riff, I want to give a huge shout out to my really, really good friend, Tyler Dunn. Tyler is living out in Denver, Colorado. He is an amazing musician, one of the best that I know. Just so grateful for the music provided. In addition to that, we are so thankful for our logo as well. That was done by my friend Mike Rizzo, living out in Hollywood, California. He is a man of many talents, as you can see by the terrific artwork provided. Thank you guys. You do so much for us, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, ditto from me as well. It was everything that we wanted. We knew instantly when you guys sent the product over to us that that's something that we wanted for our show. It's exactly what we feel like captures the mood of our program and is very much appreciated. So thank you. On today's episode 2 of Slightly Sideways, it's very different than the experience we had in week 1, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. So the episode 1, for those of you who haven't caught up to speed, we had kind of dove into a topic that we're not really well versed in as far as the sports world goes, and that was English Premier League soccer. So we kind of did a quirky episode on how we were going to pick a team to follow for the upcoming season. Again, if you haven't given that a listen, go ahead and go over to Spotify. You can find us at Slightly Sideways and give that a listen when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of plugs, we are on Spotify, like my co-host said, Slightly Sideways Podcast. We do have a Twitter account now. We're on old twitter.com. If you'd like to give us a follow over there on Twitter at Slightly Sideway. If you're on Facebook, you can follow our Facebook page at Slightly Sideways Podcast. And if you have any inquiries or any feedback, any topics that you'd like the two of us to discuss on future episodes, you can reach out to our business email, slightlyside.pod@gmail.com. For today's episode, we have MLB, we have Joe Kelly getting suspended, we have a potential suspended season, and we have the NHL Qualifiers. But first, Corbin, we have fan mail. And this fan mail comes from a very special friend of the show, Scott Jones. Scott reached out to us after the first episode and said, you know what? I so thoroughly enjoyed the coverage of the soccer. I love the soccer. Please give me more of the soccer. And Scott, your wish is our demand. We will give you more soccer.
For those people who don't know there, Scott Jones is an absolute living legend, San Diego State alum. He actually has 3 statues in his honor on campus. I'm pretty sure he's the only person in the history of the world to have that. Pretty impressive stuff. So we're so honored that he's listening and giving us positive feedback.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate you being here. We're going to recap what happened in the English Premier League last week. We have a couple notes from the Sheffield game. As you guys know, if you watched the episode last week, we potted Sheffield United out of the pot. There was much rejoicing. And on Sunday, there was slightly less rejoicing from the two of us here. It was a war of attrition for the Blades. They came out a little bit flat, not really showing a whole lot of energy. Southampton was pressing us pretty early on. They created a bunch of chances. It was really, and Corbin, you and I were discussing this during the game, it was very much a bend but don't break. It was like the last line of defense there with our back line, and Dino Henderson was the only thing keeping us in that game for a while.
Absolutely. And honestly, we had our chances. We were actually up 1-0 in the game, which, considering how the overall game went, it's kind of miraculous. We had the opportunity to have about the 3-0, 4-0 lead. We had a lot of missed chances. Pretty much after that 1-0 goal, we kind of just sat back on our heels, and Southampton just kind of took it to us. And obviously, that's how the end result showed with that 3-1 final score.
Absolutely. And, so early on in the game, George Baldock played Billy Sharp in on goal, and Billy is 1v1 versus the keeper, and I'm literally screaming at my television, like, get it out of your feet, Billy, get out of your feet, put the shot on net, put the shot on net. And he's literally, I'm not sure what he ran out of first, whether he ran out of space or ideas. He literally tries to go 5-hole through the wickets, and it just did not work out.
Yeah, it seemed like he was handling a hot potato. He got a perfect pass up the sideline, which, was as perfect as it could have been. Got a little too close into goal and just didn't know what to do with it, put it outside. Clearly frustrated with himself. There were some expletives that you could see on the TV, but that's how she goes sometimes. And unfortunate for Sheffield, but what can you do?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not to say that Sheffield didn't have their chances. I mean, John Lundstrom put in a ball off across from Billy Sharp in the 27th minute. But, I mean, McBurney had a sitter right there. And, I mean, credit to the keeper. He made a pretty phenomenal save. Lindstrom took a shot off a volley on another poorly defended cross from Billy Sharp. And, I mean, you could sense the momentum changing as those saves were being made. You could really feel the momentum kind of coming behind Southampton because, like Corbin said, it easily could have been 3-0 at one point. I mean, in the first half, Sheffield only has 28% of the ball. They really wanted to just kind of sit back and absorb that pressure from Southampton and try to break on the counter. And, to their credit, to Sheffield's credit, it worked in the first half.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I had kind of pointed out was, it is the final game of the season, and both teams more or less didn't really have a whole lot to play for. They really couldn't have improved their situation as far as qualifying for cups for next year. Sheffield was sitting at number 8 in the table before the game, ended up finishing 9th in the season, which for them was tremendous. A lot of expectations were that they were going to be a team that could possibly get relegated as they had recently gotten promoted. So for them to finish top 10 in the Premier League is absolutely outstanding. Not sure if it was just the players getting worn down because they were having to play games more often with the shortened season. They were without some players. They were without one of their strikers, McGoldrick, who I believe had a suspension. I think he had a red card in the previous game and wasn't able to play. So it was kind of, you can kind of just tell that there wasn't really that 100% effort. And I feel like there's a lot of factors that could have played into that.
Right. And in the end, I know we talked about this late in the second half. As Sheffield were unable to put away their chances and only having 28% possession for the game, there was just kind of this wall of momentum for Southampton that they knew that they were, even though they were down on the scoreboard, they were still very much in control of the game. And in the end, I feel like it was just a little bit too much class from Che Adams. Che Adams, deservedly so, man of the match, 2 goals to his name. That just goes to show you how badly the Blades missed Che Adams. I mean, he was phenomenal.
Absolutely. And full credit to Southampton. Like you mentioned, it could have really been stacked against them if Sheffield would have put their chances away, but clearly they didn't. As soon as Southampton got it to 1-1, you can kind of just tell from the vibe that it was their game to lose, and they took full advantage and they put it away when they had to, and credit to them.
Yep, absolutely. Credit to Southam. They converted their chances and Sheffield, did not. So we look forward to next season. We'll see if we can replicate that success, and we'll get ready for the 12th of September.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that new season is soon approaching. Obviously, with the current situation with the virus, the seasons had gotten pushed back, but they're going to start back up when they normally do here in September, which is good for soccer fans. They don't have to have a prolonged off season. So only about a month and a half here, and we'll have the new season start back up. So really good for us here on our end who are just getting into this. We don't have to wait long for a new season.
Yeah, absolutely. And from that final game of the season, we talked a lot about last week, the bottom 3 teams fighting for their relegation life. In the end, it was a little bit dicey for Villa, but Villa were able to maintain their spot in the Premier League. Bournemouth and Watford go down, and we're still unsure on everyone that's coming up from the Championship. Is that right, Corbin?
Yeah, well, there's 2 teams that are for sure through. How the process breaks down, which I think is absolutely fascinating compared to American sports. I actually prefer this style. We'll get your opinion on this matter here in just a second. How it works is for the Championship League, which is the league below Premier League, the top 2 teams that finish in the top of the table or the standings, for a more American term, automatically get the promotion to go to the Premier League. So right now, Leeds United as well as West Bromwich Albion are the top 2. So they automatically are going to get promoted to Premier League next year. What's cool from there is they actually take the teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the table and they do a little mini tournament between the 4 teams to determine who the last and final third team is going to be that gets promoted to Premier League. So how that works is the first round, the same 2 teams play each other twice. So they have a home and away game, and it's based off of an aggregate. So on whoever scores the most goals between the 2 games is going to go on to the next level. And then the championship is a single game between the final 2 teams, and whoever wins that game outright gets the promotion to Premier League.
And it's just such a fascinating concept for those of us that follow American sports, because this whole concept of relegation and promotion, it really encourages teams to continue to fight throughout the season. It's very anti-tanking. Even if you're not competing for a championship, there's still a reason to play hard, see the season out, try to win games, because you don't want to get relegated down to that lower league because you're missing out on resources, you're missing out on television contracts, and all these things that provide money and resources to these top teams in the Premier League.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I really respect about what the Premier League does here in America. Prime example, I'm a Phoenix Suns fan, and for the last decade, the Suns have been one of the worst teams in the NBA. And they're, for being the worst team in the NBA, they get rewarded with a top tier draft pick, which in turn helps their future if they get the pick right. So it's kind of a backward system where you're doing a poor job, in most instances losing on purpose, yet you're getting a pretty good reward considering how bad you've played. For the Premier League, there's no coddling, there's no draft. So hey, you perform poorly, that's unfortunate. Guess what? You're not good enough to play in this league. You're going down. So there are consequences for teams that are playing poorly consistently. You don't get that redo, if you will, by, oh, you were terrible, let's give you a gift and a draft pick.
Yeah, and I mean, that just goes to show you that whole point for relegation and promotion is it seems like it's the rich get richer philosophy, and the teams that are kind of scrapping and trying to get by is they're really trying to keep up between, the haves and the have-nots in terms of resources in the EPL.
Absolutely. And also, as far as, because like I mentioned, there's not a draft that we can go into there. So it's very important to have success as a team, because if you want to get players to play for your team and have transfers, you want to make sure that you're performing well. That way you can maintain that success and stay in that top tier.
Absolutely.
All right. So as far as that goes, we're going to go ahead and roll into our next topic here as far as Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball season has just started up here. For all you at home who don't already know, I'm assuming many of you are already aware of that. It's been a very big topic here, especially over the last couple weeks. Kenny, do you want to go ahead and kind of give the breakdown as far as the current restart formula for the new Major League Baseball season?
Yeah, so it's 60-game season, at least it's in its proposed form. There's going to be 40 games against your division opponents, and 20 games of that schedule are going to be quote-unquote interleague games, and those are going to be regionally based against teams. If you're in the AL East, you're playing NL East teams, and if you're in the NL West, you're playing AL West teams. So it's meant to try to reduce a little bit of that travel.
Gotcha. And there's obviously a pretty big story in the last few days here. There was actually a player, Joe Kelly of the Dodgers, who had gotten suspended for an incident with the Houston Astros. If you can, Kane, give a little background on the story there and kind of your opinion on the matter. What do you think?
Yeah, so, there's a lot of outrage, especially on Twitter. A lot of guys are coming to the aid of Joe Kelly, who plunked Bregman in the Astros game versus the Dodgers, and then proceeded to throw behind Carlos Correa and proceeded to have a benches clearing dance off, as they usually have in Major League Baseball. They say it's a benches clearing brawl, but really in baseball, no one really brawls. They just kind of dance around each other.
Push each other around.
Yeah, exactly. Get their hands on each other a little bit. It's an interesting topic. Joe Kelly receives an 8-game suspension, which over a 60-game season, we went ahead and did the math for you. As I tweeted on our Twitter account @SlightlySideway, we did the math. Over the course of a 162-game season, that suspension would be 22 games, which is unprecedented level of punishment. And mind you, this is for throwing behind Correa. And granted, maybe he hit Bregman also, sure. But the pitch to Correa, he didn't hit him. But what you're seeing now, and my kind of whole take on this, is the suspension is overly punitive. The league had an opportunity to get this punishment right with the Houston Astros. They chose not to vacate their championship. They chose not to punish any of the players behind that World Series title. And so you have a lot of players around the league that are kind of shrugging their shoulders like, we got slighted in all of this. I work and I'm speaking from a player's perspective, I worked my ass off to hopefully get lucky enough to win one championship over a 16-year career. And you have players that were guilty of openly cheating and basically stole an opportunity from somebody who's trying to play the game the right way. So I understand the players' frustrations. I understand how that's going to come out over the course of the season. But Corbin, how do you feel about it?
So my initial reaction to the situation was a lot like your opinion there, that it was a little harsh given the 8-game suspension with the shortened season, with it equating to 22 games in a regular season, which is very, very, very steep given, a plunked batter. But the more I thought about it, the more I looked at the situation, my opinion has changed. Probably not the most favorable opinion. I think most people, most real big baseball fans are, they understand the underlying like do's and do nots of the game, the underlying rules of, okay, you messed with us, we're going to hit you kind of mentality. But to kind of go into the situation, so to rewind, it all started. There's two factors involved in my decision on what I think on this matter. The first goes to the officiating. I think the umpires absolutely botched the situation that happened during that game. Reason being, the batter before Correa, Alex Bregman, is up at the plate, and Kelly is throwing it all over the place, throws it 3-0, and pretty blatantly throws and hits him. And even before that, he had thrown a ball that had almost hit him in the head, which I'm all for. If you want to plunk a guy because of whatever riff you have, that's fine. But at least hit him in the side or the butt or whatever. Don't throw it at his head. That can cause some serious injury. So he gets hit. He goes down to first base. And while Correa is at the plate, Bregman is leading off first, and Kelly decides to throw over to first for a pickoff move. But if you really look at the replay, it really looks like Kelly is trying to throw it into like his ribs as he's sliding into first. So he's clearly, in my opinion, trying to hit Bregman. Would you more or less agree with that point so far, Koenig?
Yeah, and it's kind of a complicated issue because you see a lot of throws over to first base where it's pretty borderline. They're trying to get that quick tag down on the runner. And so, I think you have to consider everything that occurred before that. After he threw at Bregman and then he hit him and now he's throwing it over to first base. So you kind of start to add up all the pieces, and it doesn't seem like just a routine over to first base. It seems like there's a little bit of purpose behind that.
Absolutely. And so to add on to the situation, so you've got a home plate umpire who obviously you have to think that the umpires in baseball are well versed on the Astro situation and should be looking out for things like this. Like when Bregman got hit, there should have automatically been a warning to both benches. Hey, okay, you hit him, that's it. Anything else that comes close, we're going to eject whoever's playing. We're not messing around. That was not done. There was the first base umpire who, I mean, if you have eyeballs, you could see that he was clearly not trying to technically pick him off. That should have been more of a second sign to be like, okay, like he's clearly trying to hit these players. And then the at bat to Correa, he was all over the place, couldn't find his command, ended up throwing behind him behind his back, which again should have been a sign to the umpire, okay, like we need to get this guy out of here. What's going on? Miraculously, he actually ended up striking out Correa, which for how poor his control was, I'm pretty amazed that Correa swung at anything or actually struck out. And then, of course, he goes off and the riffraff happens. So first point is the umpires should have stepped in right from the get-go. As soon as Bregman got hit, there should have been at least a warning called. Hey, we're not going to deal with this. Anything else close from here, you're out. That's it. We're going to eliminate this. Would you say that that's a fair assessment as far as the umpires messing up on that situation?
Yeah, I think the umpire needs to be a little bit more sensitive going into the game about what is going to happen this season. There's a lot of disgruntled players around the league who, feel slighted by this whole situation. And as an umpire, you have to go into the game understanding that this is a very realistic possibility. And, before in baseball, the players were kind of allowed to police themselves. You hit my guy, I hit your guy, and then the home plate umpire says, okay, you know what? A warning to both benches. The next player to hit somebody, you're fucking out of here. But it's a much more sensitive topic now just because of the role of the Astros and all of this sort of thing.
No, fair points. And I think this even stems before the season. Major League Baseball absolutely got it wrong. All they did was take away, I think, a few draft picks from the Astros. Really, nothing that's too backbreaking. There was no consequences for any of the players who were involved. Yeah, they fired their manager, but more or less the personnel on the field stayed exactly the same. So that's an issue all in itself that baseball messed that up. But going back to the Joe Kelly situation, so my second factor in my school of thought for the suspension. So Kelly strikes out Correa to end the inning. He's walking off and he's chirping at Correa. He's making faces. Obviously, Correa's not a fan of that. Kind of gets back at him with the verbal back and forth. Sure enough, the bench is clear. Well, that right there is a huge issue with the current climate of the baseball season. This entire season has been delayed due to coronavirus. And the most important thing that has been stressed around all leagues that are playing right now is, are we going to be able to social distance these players? Are they going to be able to not, catch this virus and spread this virus as they're traveling, as they're playing? And for teams to have, a benches clearing brawl, if you will. Now, I don't think in that situation a whole lot of players actually touched each other. If you look at the replay, I think they're all relatively away from each other.
It was a whole lot of standing around.
Yeah, but just the possibility of, if Kelly and Correa were to get close enough to each other, they would have, pushed each other, punched each other. Who knows what they would have done? But it would have gotten physical. They wouldn't have just sat, 3 feet away from each other and bickered at each other. There was some animosity there. So I think that's a huge play in why the suspension is so steep, is that Major League Baseball is already under enough fire for, are we doing this correctly with all our teams still traveling? Like, yeah, they've changed their format so that teams are playing regional games against regional teams to kind of cut down on travel, but there are still teams moving around, traveling. And I think that's why the punishment was so steep, to kind of set a precedent for this season. Hey guys, like, not only in this Astros situation, I mean, it does stem from the Astros situation completely because obviously of what they did and their cheating scandal. But I think it's Major League Baseball saying, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. We understand you're upset. Like, you have the right to be upset, what have you. But we can't have this. We can't have, 25 player benches emptying and getting each other's faces. It's not what we can afford right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. And you also have to consider a lot of fans, a lot of players, a lot of organizations feel as though because the league got it wrong with their punishment of the Astros and that whole situation, everyone already has this mentality and this mindset that, oh, Rob Manfred of Major League Baseball is shielding the Astros. They got a slap on the wrist and that sort of thing. And then you have a player like Joe Kelly who receives this super punitive punishment. And so now it feels even more so that Major League Baseball is protecting the Astros because, hey, they're throwing down the gauntlet saying no one's going to be throwing at the Astros this year. Look what happened to Joe Kelly. He's out for almost, 17% of the season.
I just think with the punishment being so steep, Major League Baseball is not dumb. They know that this was going to happen this year, and it probably still will happen. Teams later on in the season, if the season progresses, if teams are out of the playoffs, they're going to throw out the Astros. Like, okay, whatever, you're going to give me an 8-game ban. Like, we're out of the playoffs anyway. I'm going to do it. I think they're just trying to do what they can to limit this as much as they can for this shortened season.
Yeah, and speaking of a shortened season, already a short season as it is, about to be potentially an even shorter season with rules coming out of Major League Baseball regarding the players who are starting to test positive for this coronavirus. You had the 19 players and staff for the Miami Marlins who have tested positive, and it's created this sense of a domino effect league-wide because you had the Phillies who had played the Marlins in that series. Well, now suddenly the Yankees, who are now playing the Phillies in the following series, are like, well, I don't want to play the Phillies because they were just involved with that team who tested positive, 19 players and staff. And now you have the Nationals players and their coaching staff saying they don't want to go to Miami to play the series. And just this morning, you had the Cardinals and Brewers game that was canceled because of 2 positive tests as well. And so it kind of makes you wonder, how many positive tests will it take before Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball sit down and say, what are the dangers at play for playing in a pandemic climate, and what are the rewards if we continue to play, and find that risk reward with what you're risking to have a season?
Yeah, and I don't know your input on even the season starting. I was under the mindset that if the season actually was a season and they played a season that was going to be an absolute miracle. More or less, the Players Association and Major League Baseball couldn't agree on terms for the startup of the season, where Major League Baseball just said, well, we're going to do this anyway, so here's a 60-game season, show up and let's play. But yeah, they're absolutely in absolute hot water right now. I mean, 19 players within an organization. 19, that is, even one would be too many, but 19, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, how many games have been played so far?
For like 8 or 9 games, yeah.
Yeah, so we're like around 15% of the season that has started. And just today, Manfred had said to the Players Association, essentially, hey, guys, given what's happening in the last week or so, we might not be able to play this season. So I think it's inevitable. There's going to be more cases that are going to pop up. It's going to be these teams that play these teams that have these corona cases. And I think it's just going to be, we have to throw in the towel, and we're just going to have to wait until we figure out a better solution and when it's safe to play. What do you think? Do you think it's going to continue? Do you think they're going to somehow find a way to finish this season?
I really don't see the season playing out. I'm optimistic, obviously. I think sports are great for, a culture. I think it's great for people to have something to rally behind. We're not going to get too much into real world issues, but sports is what brings us together. And I honestly hope that we can finish the season, but realistically speaking, with all of the outbreaks that are occurring, Major League Baseball has a responsibility to their players and their investment, that we need to protect our players. And God forbid anything were to happen to some big market player like a Mike Trout or a Mookie Betts or a Bryce Harper, and they have some kind of long-term lasting effects from this whole virus. At the end of the day, these players are employed by Major League Baseball, and it's the employer's responsibility to take care of their people.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I pointed to before the season even started. I was skeptical that there would even be a season, thinking that Major League Baseball would have that mentality. Like you said, these are assets that we need to protect. Why are we going to roll out, these superstars that we've done all our marketing, all our branding behind, to potentially put them in danger, to get sick, to who knows what to happen with them? I don't even want to speculate on that, because that's just not what I want to do. But I think Major League Baseball is quickly realizing the hole that they are in. Not to mind you, I think a 60-game season is kind of gimmicky. I mean, yeah, it's what we can do in the current situation, apparently. But I think a lot of fans would kind of discredit whoever won the World Series this year, given the current climate. So I don't even really know how much of the heart of the players is in these games. What do you think on that matter?
Yeah, the players have so many concerns. They're trying to keep themselves safe. They're trying to keep, their families safe, anybody who's traveling with them. Major League Baseball, incidentally, is the only sport to travel to home venues at the moment. I know that the MLS's back tournament was held at the Orlando site, and so the players were kind of in a bubble, if you will, for that. The NBA is on the verge of restarting, and they're in their own bubble at Disney World. And then you have the NHL, and we'll get into that in a minute. They're playing a quasi-bubble themselves. So MLB is kind of the only league to kind of experiment with this traveling. I mean, you even have it to the point where teams can't travel into Toronto. So Toronto's playing their games in Pittsburgh and I guess some Buffalo minor league facility. So it just kind of makes you think, like, are the players really into it? You already have several players who have opted out for this season. How much longer is this going to continue before you see more of that?
Absolutely. I think it's just going to come down to two things. It's either going to be MLB finally realizing, hey, this is a bad idea. We tried to provide baseball for our fans, for everybody out there who loves the game, which I respect. People right now, they need sports in their lives. But either MLB pulls the plug and says, nope, no more. Or I think it's going to take a superstar like a Mike Trout to say, you know what? I don't feel comfortable playing the season anymore, because that will tip the scale. There'll be more and more players that will say, yep, well, if Mike Trout's not playing, then I don't want to play either. And I think it would just be a domino effect, and that would squash that bug as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think, and we'll kind of end on this point, I feel as though the season just needs to be suspended. I'm not saying it needs to be canceled, but we need to take like a 2-week break. Rob Manfred needs to just pull the plug on this experiment for 2 weeks. Let the players in quarantine be in quarantine. Let the players who are healthy stay healthy. And we need to just kind of reevaluate this season in 2-week phases. I know the MLS did this for the longest time. They had their season on pause, and they're like, oh, player camps are going to open at the end of May. And then it was, oh, okay, well, it's still not getting better. It's going to now be the end of June. And oh, now this tournament isn't even going to start until the beginning of July. And so I think something like that should be effective for Major League Baseball also. You're giving the impression to the fans that we don't want to give up on the season, but we do need to take the time to allow the players to kind of get this under control. And it was such an interesting concept that Rob Manfred, reached out to Tony Clark and said, hey, we need to do a better job. It's like, what do you mean we, dude? Like, you are the one who put these measures in place.
Absolutely. And one of the original thoughts when the baseball season was, in plans to get kicked back up, there was ideas kind of like what the NHL is doing right now, where you take half the teams, isolate them in an area like Arizona, half the teams, isolate them in a different area. I don't want to say Florida because right now that seems like a terrible place to be. But essentially, we're not going to be flying. We're not going to be traveling other than getting on a bus. But we can more easily quarantine and play these games. Unless they do that, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to have any type of season given the current climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're just talking about baseball at this point. I mean, in future episodes, we'll get into what this means for the NFL, what it means for college football. I mean, college football is one of those sports where it's like the fans have such a significant impact, it feels like. And to not have fans, first of all, and then you have to consider the fact that you're trying to protect the athletes. I mean, I feel like we're going to have some long-term lasting effects that are going to trickle down as this goes on.
Absolutely. So, like I kind of mentioned there, the NHL has been kind of doing a different method from what Major League Baseball is doing with their restart up. Koenig, do you want to kind of go into detail what the NHL is doing on their end?
Yeah, so it's actually really exciting. Starting tomorrow, the NHL Qualifiers are going to kick off, and we have 2 different hub cities, as I mentioned previously. You have the Eastern Conference teams who are hubbed out of Toronto, and then you have the Western Conference teams in Edmonton. And it's a really interesting tournament. Obviously, this is unprecedented. The top 4 teams in each conference will be doing a round robin style of tournament. So in the Eastern Conference, you have the Bruins, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Washington Capitals. And in the Western Conference, you have the reigning champions St. Louis Blues, Colorado Avalanche, the Vegas Golden Knights, and Dallas Stars. And do you want to kind of talk briefly about what that round robin format looks like for those teams?
Yeah, so as far as those top 4 for each conferences, they're each going to play each other once to kind of determine who is going to be in those top 4 seeds. I believe if teams were to tie, the tiebreaker for if there was a tie for a team to go ahead of them in the standings would go back to the regular season standings and points. Is that accurate?
It would be points percentage, but yes.
Points percentage. So it's a good thing that you brought that up because it's actually very important. The current layout of the playoff formula, if you actually look at the standings, normally, every team plays 82 games, and then based on the points, that's how the playoffs are seeded. But when the shutdown happened, there were some teams that had played more games than others. So what the NHL did was they took the point percentage based on how many games each team had played. So if you look at the standings, there might be some teams that have more points than others that are lower in the playoff bracket, but the reason being, those teams that are above them have played less games, and therefore the points percentage gives them a higher outcome.
Yeah, well stated. And I mean, this is obviously, like we said before, an unprecedented type of tournament. It's a 24-team tournament, and you kind of split the playoffs in half. Well, not in half exactly, but you have some teams in one format. You have other teams who are qualifying in another format. And the top 4 teams in each conference are trying to fight for their seed. And I'll be upfront and honest about it. As a Boston Bruins fan, I felt as though the Bruins were far and away the best team in the league this season. And at first, when I read about this whole format, I was like, well, that's kind of a slap in the face to the Bruins. Like, we were the best team throughout the entire season. Why should we have to prove in a restart that we can beat the Lightning, Flyers, and Capitals?
I do think in that sense it is unfair, but it does make sense. Like the NHL can't just make an exception for one team. Yes, the Bruins were the best team in the NHL, but they can't just be like, oh, well, The Bruins were the only clear-cut team that deserved a 1 seed, so we're going to give them a 1, and we're going to have everybody else do this format. So I understand where they're coming from. Is it fair in this instance? I don't believe so. I'm hopeful that the Bruins will play well enough that they'll get that number 1 seed anyway, and it's not going to be a problem. As far as, so we've talked about the top 4 for each conference. What about the teams that are jockeying for the 5 through 8 spots for each conference for the playoffs, Koenig? What's the breakdown on that look like?
Yeah, so it's
Correct.
4 series of 8 teams, right? And in the Western Conference, you have the Edmonton Oilers as a 5 seed facing off against the 12 seed Blackhawks. You have the 6 seed Nashville Predators against the 11 seed Arizona Coyotes. That still feels weird to say. You have the 7 seed Vancouver Canucks versus the number 10 seed Minnesota Wild, and the 8 seed Calgary Flames against the 9 Winnipeg Jets.
Yes, and so in the Eastern Conference, the layout goes, we've got the number 5 Penguins versus the number 12 Montreal Canadiens. We've got the number 6 Carolina Hurricanes versus the number 11 New York Rangers. The number 7 New York Islanders versus the number 10 Florida Panthers. And then wrapping up the number 8 Maple Leafs, Toronto Maple Leafs, and the number 9 Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, the current format for the teams that are playing to get into the playoffs, these teams have technically not gotten into the playoffs, unlike the other top 4. So they are playing to get into the playoffs to get their seed. They are having a 5-game series between their opponent that they're matched up with. So obviously, first team to get to 3 wins, it wins that series and gets a playoff spot. Koenig, do you think that this system is fair to just jump right into playoff games without any buffer other than teams practicing against themselves? Do you think there should have been maybe some simulated games before this, or do you think this is the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few teams who had a couple exhibition games in advance of this format. I know the Bruins played the Columbus Blue Jackets last night, or maybe it was the night before, so they had a warm-up game, but nothing really warms you up for the playoffs. And that's kind of why I've really started a likeness to this round robin format, is as opposed to those top 4 seeds getting a bye and sitting on their couch waiting for the next series, it allows them to play meaningful playoff games and kind of get into the feel of the playoffs, if you will. These teams who are trying to qualify for the postseason, technically they're in the postseason, but they're just qualifying for the quote-unquote first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're going to be playing meaningful games, playoff games, and so the fact that the Bruins and the Lightning and the Flyers, et cetera, still have to earn that number 1 seed means they're going to have to play those significant games, and hopefully they'll be up to speed. Because a lot of times what you see, and you see this all the time in the NFL especially, is that team that has that first round bye is almost at a slight disadvantage going into the next round. Is that right, Corbin?
Yeah, absolutely. These teams that are fighting to get in the playoffs, they're having to be on their A game. They're scrapping, they're firing on all cylinders to get in. And a lot of times that carries over into the playoffs where you've got a team that's locked up their spot for however long that might be a little cooled down and they run right into a buzzsaw.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with 24 teams in the playoffs, it kind of opens the door. And, we talked about seeding, we talked about everything like that. This is the one season that I honestly think that the seeding really doesn't have a whole lot of impact, just because the NHL has taken so much time off. You have teams who are in form at the time of the shutdown who are playing their best. Well, now they lose all that momentum. It's all about playing your best hockey when it counts. And this is the postseason, and it's literally anybody's race. Anybody could win. Do you have a favorite in this 24-team system?
I'll absolutely give you a favorite here. You're obviously a big time Boston Bruins fan, so you're more versed on the side of the Eastern Conference, and I'm an Arizona Coyotes fan. I'm more versed on the Western Conference. I'm going to give you my favorite to come out of the West, and then I'll also give you my sleeper to come out of the West, because I do think this year, especially this year, like you mentioned, with kind of everybody starting from the ground floor level again without really having momentum or any kind of stride, I think this is a definite year that we could see a sleeper slip through. As far as my favorite in the West, I hate to go with the obvious choice, but I do think this team from top to bottom is the best team. The St. Louis Blues.
What?
You like that?
God.
I've been able to see this team play live a couple times. I saw them play in Arizona, and I also saw them play in Vegas. And they have a great goaltender in Binnington. They're all around. They have a great defense. They have scores. They're balanced. They have depth. Everything that you need to have success in the playoffs. They're battle tested. They're returning Stanley Cup champions. They were, correct me if I'm wrong, last year when they played the Bruins in the Stanley Cup, they were actually trailing in that series, and they won 2 in a row to beat the Bruins, didn't they?
It was kind of a seesaw back and forth. The Bruins had to win in St. Louis to send it back to Boston for Game 7.
Right. Yeah, you're correct there. But still, no easy task to have to go back to Boston for a Game 7 in a Stanley Cup when they hadn't won a Stanley Cup in like 50 years. So they have that under their belt. They know that they can win games like that, which I think is very, very crucial come playoff time, especially right now where teams could potentially not have any momentum. You need to rely on your experience. And I think the Blues absolutely benefit from that. How about you? What do you think about as far as a favorite from the East?
And that's so interesting that we talk about last year's Cup final. As much as it pains me to kind of relive that whole experience. I mean, credit to the Blues. They played a style that we just couldn't contend with. And, we were actually in Boston for Game 7.
Yes, unfortunately we weren't able to score any tickets just given the current climate of ticket prices. But we had actually planned a trip to Boston before we even knew that the Bruins were going to be in the Stanley Cup. So it just happened to work out that we were there when it was happening. But we did watch the game in a pub, which was 50 yards from the stadium.
Yeah, we had a spot right there on Canal Street. It was literally like 1 block away from the Garden, and it was just jam-packed full of people, elbow to elbow, who are, just as passionate as we are about the Bruins and just hockey in general. And it was kind of my first experience in like a winner-take-all championship setting in a city like Boston that's so passionate about its sports, obviously. But that surprises me, like that you go with the Blues. Like, I thought for sure you'd go with a team like the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, I mean, if there was fans, maybe that would tie into it if they had their home supporting fans there with them to kind of push them through. The Oilers, I mean, you can't go wrong with Connor McDavid, best player in hockey. I think that's pretty much a given. I mean, would you agree? There's really no doubt there.
I mean, you've got 2 extremely talented players with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They're number 1 and number 2 league-wide, combining for 87 power play points between the 2 of them. So, I mean, just look out for them on the power play because they are deadly.
Absolutely. But, the thing that has kind of hindered the Oilers is the depth. Yes, they have 2 outstanding players, but then, I mean, you usually play 4 lines in a playoff hockey game. I mean, you can only play 2 players in the same. I think they play in the same line. I'm almost certain they play in the same line. And then you've got 15 other players that are not Draisaitl and are not McDavid. That could be a problem.
The other thing to kind of keep your eye on is the whole goaltender situation in Edmonton, because I was listening to an interview with Dave Tippett earlier today, and he's still not sure who's going to start in net for Edmonton. Is it going to be Mike Smith? Is it going to be Mikko Koskinen? He still doesn't know. We're like on the eve of the qualifying round, and Dave Tippett still doesn't know.
Oh, man. And Mike Smith, I have some vivid memories of Mike Smith being a Coyotes fan. 2012, he single-handedly took us to the Western Conference Finals. The dude literally stood on his head and just carried us, beat the Blackhawks, beat the Predators. Since he's left the Coyotes, he's had his ups and downs. He's played good. He's played bad. I just think hopefully they can find that consistency in the goaltending, and they can. I don't wish any team to not win or to lose. I want to see the best team win. I don't think that team is going to be the Coyotes as much as I'd like to say that, but I'll be real if I'm going to be upfront with everybody.
Right.
So we'll see. There's so many factors involved. There's so many unknowns involved. A team like the Bruins could come out and just lay an egg. They could be terrible. Yeah. We don't know. There's such a gap.
That's what's so interesting. What's so captivating about this tournament is it's so wide open. It's anybody can get hot and make a run at the Cup this year. I know you went with your favorite with the Blues. I'm obviously going to stick to, in the Eastern Conference, I will stick with the Bruins, not just because I'm a Bruins fan, but I feel as though they have it, okay? They have that top line with Marchand and Pasta and Bergeron. They have arguably the best goaltender tandem in the entire league with Tuukka and Jaro Halak. And, everybody talks about this quote-unquote perfection line, which I fucking hate, by the way. Stop calling it the perfection line. But it's kind of the lesser known players on the Bruins, the kind of blue collar guys that get into the dirty areas and get the work in. When the Bruins are playing with their depth and when they're playing all four lines and guys like Charlie Coyle and Sean Corrali and Chris Wagner are getting involved and Bjorky and Nordstrom are getting on the score sheet, the Bruins are extremely tough to beat because they're balanced, they're deep, and they can beat you. You have to be on, you can't miss a shift because the Bruins will make you pay.
I absolutely agree. I want to disagree with you so bad, but clearly the Bruins are the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. As far as who's behind them, the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning have shown time and time again that, yeah, they can put up a ton of points in the regular season, but come playoff time, that's a team that just can't really seem to figure it out. I don't trust them when it comes to the playoffs. As far as a team that I think can push the Bruins, if I were to have to go up against the Bruins, I do think a team like the Capitals. Again, I have to fall back on the experience right now because I just don't know how these teams are going to perform momentum-wise when this playoff series kicks back up. So I'll take an experienced team like the Capitals, and that's really the only team that I could say with confidence has a decent chance to kind of go up with the Boston Bruins.
That's fair. I mean, a team that's been there, done that, they've won a cup, they've got talented players, they can score, they play great defense, they've got great goaltending. So I don't disagree with you at all. And so we're being really original here. We're going with the number one seeds to be the favorite. But Corbin, do you have do you have a sleeper or somebody that maybe people aren't thinking about who can make a run at this cup this year?
Yes, I have a sleeper 1 who is my official sleeper, and I have a sleeper 2.0, which would have been my team if the restart didn't happen.
Okay.
So I'll give you my sleeper who I think has a chance to win. And I'm going to go with the Calgary Flames.
Really?
This is a team. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is a team that was number 1 in the West last year, which everybody seems to forget. They had 107 points last year. The team more or less is the same. They have superstars that can really put the puck in the back of the net. One of my favorite players to watch, Johnny Gaudreau, I think is just one of the most exciting players in hockey. I think a team that has the potential to score as often as they do is going to be big because I think the goalies are going to be rusty. And I'm not too certain that there's going to be so many goalies that are just going to be lights out, shut out when this restart happens. So I kind of want a team that I know can put the puck in the back of the net. I think the Flames are one of those teams this year that has just really struggled kind of gaining their stride, but an absolute sleeping giant. I think if they can piece it together, I think they'll be very, very difficult for just about anybody, even in a cup matchup against whoever comes out of the East.
Yeah, and it could be anybody, and obviously I favor the Bruins, but some dark horse that I've got my eye on, and this isn't a sexy pick. I'm picking as my sleeper the Florida Panthers. and hear me out on this.
I don't mean to laugh at you because you could very well be right. I want to hear your explanation.
The Florida Panthers have kind of embodied mediocrity over the last 10 years or so. But you've got Joel Quenneville, a coach who's been there, done that. He made a name for himself with Chicago Blackhawks when he won those 3 championships in that city. They're a lesser-known team. They don't have necessarily some bright superstar players, but they do have 5 guys on their roster who have each scored 20 goals this season. You've got guys like Jonathan Huberdeau, Alexander Barkov, Mike Hoffman, Evgeny Dadonov, and my guy Noel Acciari, who used to play on the Bruins. And when I look at a team like the Florida Panthers, they kind of embody that same spirit in my eyes that St. Louis had last year. St. Louis showed what a team with above average, not fantastic, but above average players can do when you can rally behind a hot goaltender. And in my eyes, if you're looking for a sleeper team, that hot goaltender is Sergei Bobrovsky. He is going to take the Florida Panthers as far as he can muster. And if anything, so if he can be anything like he was in 2019, then Florida can absolutely make a run at the Cup, okay? Bobrovsky, when he was with the Blue Jackets last year, I think you'll remember this, swept the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning out of the first round, who, oh, by the way, led the league with nearly a 4 goals a game and 28% power play success. What did Sergei Bobrovsky do to the Tampa Bay Lightning in that series? One of the most prolific scoring teams in recent memory. 5 goals over 11 periods in that series.
It's hard to argue with that. And Bobrovsky is just, when he's on his game, you could argue he's the best goalie in hockey. I mean, when he was with the Blue Jackets last year, he was absolutely stellar. At first glance, you think of Florida Panthers, you think there's just not a lot to think about with the Florida Panthers, but you make some good points, and it could come down to that. It could be something as simple as a hot goalie that could carry your team. I mean, heck, if your team's only scoring 1 goal a game, it doesn't matter if your goalie's not giving up anything. So I completely get where you're coming from. One team that I would point to in the East, if I could, I don't know if I would call this team a sleeper because I'm pretty sure they're in the 4th spot right now. But I think the Flyers could be a team 9-1 before the break happened, one of the hottest teams in hockey. Again, I don't know if that momentum is going to carry. It's impossible to know, impossible to say. But with how they were clicking on all cylinders before that break happened, it's hard not to look at them and be kind of a little bit mesmerized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes to show, you mentioned earlier how you might think that the goalies come out with a little bit of rust. Sometimes it takes a few games at the start of the regular season for goalies to kind of catch up, with the players. And so, especially in this format, it could very well be a hot goaltender that can carry their team to the Cup final. I mean, we saw it with St. Louis last year. Basically, from February on, Jordan Binnington put the team on his back and basically carried them to that championship. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, he was the complete difference. When they changed to him, everything changed for that team. They absolutely caught fire. The team started to believe, and it was without that. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Blues wouldn't even have made the playoffs if they didn't make that change. So that's a very, very good point.
But, heading into this tournament, like we've said before, it's literally anybody's race. Anybody from 1 through 12. If you're in the qualifying round, you have life. And that's what makes the Stanley Cup playoffs so exciting.
Absolutely. Just real quick, I wanted to cover on my 2.0 team because I said I kind of had two teams as my sleeper. One team, if this was no break in the action, I think the Vancouver Canucks would be a sleeper team. They have played really, really good the second half of the season that had been played before the break. They had started really, really poorly and had really turned it up, had started kind of hitting their stride. But again, when it comes down to it, the unknown is too much. I'm going to go with the team like the Flames as a sleeper because I know they can score. I know they can play well, judging by their success from last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as that goes, we'll have more on that as games are played here. So those games will be starting here over the weekend. We'll have more coverage on that next week's episode. Right now, we're going to go into the more different part of the segment. Every episode, we kind of want to have something different where maybe it's not sports related. Maybe it's, something quirky, something funny, something that people at home can just have a laugh with, or, just something different that just kind of puts a different taste in your palate, if you will. Before we get into this, I just want to mention to everybody that we have here on Slightly Sideways, if you haven't picked up on the logo, we like to have a few drinks while we do this podcast. So we are doing occasionally. We do this show live, and I feel like we do an okay enough job. We have a few beverages here on the end to kind of get us a little loose and goose. I think it kind of adds to the flavor of the show. But with that in mind, Koenig, what do you have on tap over there? What are you drinking? What can you recommend for the people out there?
So tonight, I'm going with something a little bit different. Are you ready for this one?
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
All right. I'm going with Montucky Cold Snacks, the official, unofficial beer of Montana. 16 ounces of pure refreshment, baby. Oh, yeah.
Montucky Cold Snacks. Well, okay.
It's actually fantastic. It's a very light, very refreshing beer. It's very nice for the summertime. So if you happen to see it, in your local grocery store, pick some up. They got the tall boy cans, the blue cans with the horses on them. It's just really tasty drink.
I will admit I've had Montucky in the past. It is a very, very good light beer, very easy to drink. So if you don't like really pungent beers, really bitter beers, Montucky's the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on my end here, I'm actually drinking not entirely proud of this, but I'm drinking a natural light seltzer, a natty light seltzer, which are, I believe, pretty new. These have only been around for, I don't know, like half a year, maybe, something like that.
Okay.
I'm actually drinking the flavor that is called House Rules, which is a strawberry kiwi. Not the greatest. It's really, really sweet. I was hoping it wouldn't be as sweet. I took a total gamble on it. I mean, it's got 6% alcohol, which is pretty high for a seltzer, so it'll get you drunk. But on the taste aspect, not so great.
Oh.
So, with that said, we are going to go into our final segment here on Slightly Sideways. We are going to be doing some Corb Dog trivia.
Oh, God. We're about to find out how little Koenig knows about everything.
So I have 10 trivia questions that I did some research on here on my end that I'm going to be asking Koenig. He has no clue what the questions are. He's promised me that he's not going to look up the answers because we are doing a virtual video chat. So I'm in one area, he's in another. So I'm trusting that he's not going to look up these answers. So there's different breakdown in the questions. The first half are going to be a straight answer. I'm going to give him a question and he's got to give me a straight answer. These questions have been qualified for a 5th grade education or lower.
Oh,
so
God.
not to steal the thunder from Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader, but I've got 5 questions point blank for him to answer that are a 5th grade education or lower. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, by the way, I have a master's degree, and so I'm going to feel really terrible if I can't answer 5th grade level trivia questions.
Honestly, I don't know how many of these questions I would have known in 5th grade, so they might be a little unfair. But I also went to public school in Arizona, which is not the greatest. But
Yeah,
we'll not go into that. The other half of the questions is going to be a true or false. These questions are not 5th grade or lower. These are more, give me an answer. You got a 50-50 chance, true or false. Either you get it right or you don't. So we got 10 questions here. I propose that we make this a little interesting. And I think it's more than fair, since Koenig has just been tooting his horn. He's got a master's degree. I think he needs to get at least 7 right. Otherwise, he owes a shot. And if he gets 7 or more right, I will do a shot.
There you go.
What do you think? You like that?
You like that?
He didn't like shit.
I think that's more than fair. I think next time I'm gonna have to reciprocate the trivia because I think these questions you set me up for some difficult questions here.
Well, you don't know what the questions are. You could get 10 out of 10, and you could have been like, "Oh, that's whatever. That was fine."
I plan on it.
So I'm gonna let you decide. Do you want me to alternate between straight answer, true, false? You want me to give you all the straight answers, give you all the true, false? How do you want the order to go?
Mix it up.
Mix it up. Okay, so I'm just gonna alternate between true answer, true or false, true answer, true or false. So the first question.
Oh boy.
And I'll give you one that I think is pretty easy. I'll start you off with some easier questions. This is going to be a straight answer, so you have to tell me what the answer is. No true or false.
No multiple guess?
No multiple guess. You just have.
Damn it.
These are 5th grade or lower answers, so I'm not going to give you multiple choice.
I haven't been this nervous since the spelling beat in like 2nd grade.
This nervous since we pulled Sheffield out of a hat 1 week ago.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, it's on Spotify, by the way.
Okay, so the first question is, what is the mountain range that includes Mount Everest?
The Himalayas.
Is that your final answer?
Oh yeah.
That is positively, absolutely correct. He is 1 for 1. So very good,
that?
very good. I mean, like I said, I kind of started you off with the easier one, but that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
A 5th grader knows that, and so do you. So you've got that 5th grade education working for you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, the next question. This is going to be a true or false question.
All right.
Are you ready?
Oh yeah.
The unicorn is the national animal of Finland. True or false?
False.
Is that your final answer?
Indeed it is, Regis.
That answer is correct.
Oh.
It is false. The unicorn is the national animal of Scotland.
Really?
So that's an actual national animal for Scotland, just not Finland. So very good. You're 2 for 2. Very impressive. I thought that one would be a little tricky. All right, so it's not looking good on my end here. Looks like I'm going to be owning a shot here very soon, but that's okay. That's what these tests are for. Okay, are you ready for your straight answer question?
Go for it.
Okay. What is the one part of the body that cannot heal itself/themselves? What is the one part of the body that cannot heal itself/themselves? The silence is piercing.
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to think about what kind of bones I've broken in my life, and I'll rule those out.
So this one, when I read the question, I thought it was really hard, and then when I got the answer, it was pretty obvious.
Oh,
So
great. I'm gonna say, fuck.
I'm going to give you 15 more seconds.
Shit. Just to make sure I'm not cheating over here. I'm gonna say the eyes.
Is that your final answer?
No, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is incorrect. The correct answer that we were looking for is teeth.
Ah, that was my second guess. God.
Your teeth cannot heal themselves. So you're 2 for 3. You're still in good shape.
All right.
You can still miss 2 more. You know, you're okay. You're right on that threshold there. That one, again, when you hear the answer, it's a lot more obvious, but when you have to come up with it, it's tough.
Yes.
All right. Are you ready for your next true or false question?
Yes, I am.
Okay. According to Oxford dictionaries, the letter A is the most common letter in words and appears in over 10% of all English words. True or false? The letter A is the most common letter in words and appears in over 10% of all English words. True or false?
False.
Is that your final answer?
It is.
That is correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Wheel of Fortune.
Do you know what the most common letter is?
E.
Very true. Very true. Correct. Damn. All right. Well, he's 3 for 4, which is not looking good for me. He's over that 70% threshold right now. So I need you to swing and miss here on a question or two. All right. So going back to the straight answer question.
All right.
Are you ready?
You know it.
Who was the last queen of France?
Fuck. I'm doomed. The one thing that I suck at is international monarchs. I just don't do well.
I actually didn't know this until the last few weeks, and then when I was researching these questions, it happened to pop up, so I threw it on there.
I know it's wrong, but I'm gonna go with Queen Anne.
That is incorrect. The last queen of France was Marie Antoinette.
Oh, that makes sense.
And unfortunate for her, her reign of queen was taken with her beheading of the guillotine, her and her husband, King Louis, to start the French Revolution. So,
wow.
A little tidbit there for you.
There you go.
So you are 3 for 5. So you can miss one more, but then you got to run the table. So pressure is boiling. We have a true and false question hot on deck. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Gin is typically a main ingredient included in a Long Island iced tea. True or false? Gin is typically a main ingredient included in a Long Island iced tea.
True.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
You don't seem too confident.
I'm confident.
That is correct. It is true. Gin is a main ingredient in Long Island iced teas.
Yeah, I had my fair share of Long Island's at $1 drink night at Collins.
Hey, there you go. For those of you who don't know, Collins refers back to our uni days back in northern Arizona in Flagstaff, Arizona. Shout out to the Lumberjacks.
Yeah, shout out to the Lumberjacks. Shout out to Collins Pub. What's up, baby?
So you're 4 for 6. So you're right where you need to be. Not the most room for error, but you got 4 questions left. You got to get 3 of 4.
We're running the table. We're not fucking around. Let's go.
Oh, okay. So are you ready for your next straight answer?
Yes, I am.
The modern-day city of Istanbul was known by what name in the 13th century?
Oh my god.
My wife Megan will be very upset if you do not know the answer to this question.
Great. Istanbul. I know I'm gonna like kick myself when I know the answer because I don't at the moment. May I phone a friend?
No. I'm pretty sure Hannah would know it.
Yeah. This is one of those things like you start to go into like the 1300s, 1400s, and I'm just totally useless. I have no idea.
You don't even want to give an answer. You're
I
just
don't.
gonna
I don't
make
even
up.
have a guess for you.
Fair enough. The correct answer is Constantinople.
All right. I've heard
There's
that word
a
before.
there's a really annoying song by We Were Giants or some I think I don't know what the group is called, but it's Istanbul is Constantinople. Istanbul is Constantinople. And my wife loves that group and that song, and I think it's the most annoying band and song ever. But be that as it may, you are 4 for 7, which means you need to get 3 in a row or you are screwed.
We're running the table.
Okay, we have a true or false on deck. Are you ready?
Let's go.
M&M, like the candy, stands for Mars and Moordale. True or false? M&M stands for Mars and Moordale.
False.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
That is correct. It is false. Do you know what it stands for?
No, but Mordell didn't sound correctly. Mars is right. The second word is not.
You're absolutely right. The correct answer is Mars and Murray.
There you
Mars and Murray is M&M. So you are 5 for 8. 2 questions left. You have to get these 2 right.
Oh man.
This next one I think is kind of fucked, but apparently it's a 5th grade education. I didn't know this. So this one is going to ask you to provide a numeric answer. It's just going to be a whole number, so you don't have to give me like 22.4 or something ridiculous. Just give me a whole rounded number, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Straight answer. A gallon of water weighs how many pounds? Again, I don't know how a 5th grader would know this, or how a 5th grader would know Marie Antoinette. Maybe in other states with higher education standards they do.
Not in the state that I went to school in, I'll tell you that.
I mean, you just kind of have to judge this based on if you've ever picked up a gallon of water. How heavy do you think it was?
So here in our house at Seattle, we use like reusable bottles and we filter our water because it's safe to drink. I don't think I've picked up a gallon of water in like 20 years.
Oh, no.
And back in those days, things tended to weigh a lot heavier than they actually were. But I'm going to go with 5 pounds.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
I will actually let you do a lifeline on this question if you would like. Now, again, you could very much have the correct answers. I could be duping you. But if you want to ask Hannah for her opinion, I'll allow that.
I'm sticking with 5 pounds.
He's sticking with 5. I extended an arm of help, and he did not want it.
I, too, live dangerously.
And the correct answer is 8 pounds.
Oh,
8 pounds.
God.
So, I'll still read you the final question. Because why not? We have 1 question left.
Okay.
The actual technical weight of a gallon of water was like 8.34 pounds, but I just rounded it to 8, so that's whatever. Okay, so just for everybody who's, maybe not paying as much attention, Koenig now owes a shot because he did not fulfill his 7 out of 10 quota. He's at 5 out of 9 right now with the last question for people at home. True or false? The Great Wall of China is longer than the distance between London and Beijing. Is that true or false?
True.
Are you sure?
No.
Do you want to keep that answer?
Yeah, let's go with it.
You are absolutely correct. That is true. As crazy as it is, the Great Wall of China is actually almost 3 times longer than the distance between London and Beijing, which is pretty mind-boggling. So, right now, it looks like Koenig is going to the cupboard. He is getting his bet to be paid. Do you have your shot over there, Koenig?
I brought the bottle.
What is that?
Hold on. If you tuned in with us last week, this is Trader Joe's Versatile Spirit Vodka. Unofficially not sponsored by Trader Joe's. Distilled from grapes, this vodka makes its presence known in a prescribed manner. Careful distillation creates the sine qua non for the spirit. Versatility. California-grown grapes, Cabernet, Sauvignon, Merlot, and Chardonnay, no less, have been transformed, alchemy, ? Who knows, into this clean spirit brightening vodka. And I had this on last week's show for my vodka cranberries, and it's actually fantastic. So next time you're at Trader Joe's, why don't you give it a pickup? Definitely not sponsored by Trader Joe's, by the way.
Not yet. Trader Joe's, hint, hint.
We're trying, Trader Joe's. You got to meet us halfway, baby.
All right, Koenig. Well, we can't wrap up this show without you doing this shot here, so we'll go ahead and be as patient as we can here with you. He is opening the bottle. He is tipping the bottle. He is pouring. He's not even putting it into a shot glass. He's just willy-nilly pouring it into a standard glass. So I'm gonna trust that that's a shot.
It's probably 2 shots, to be honest. It was definitely a free pour.
That's fine. I'll allow it.
But I'm gonna accept my fate and my punishment. I'm 100% not smarter than a 5th grader, apparently. So we'll let this one fly. Here we go.
Down the hatch. Oh, good man. He's got that so satisfying face that you get when you drink pure alcohol and you're not a fan of drinking pure alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't Svedka, at least. I had that going for me.
Oh, absolutely. So to pick up on the Svedka reference, please reference our first ever episode. Again, the audio quality on that, not the best, but you can still check it out on Spotify. Since then, we have upgraded to microphones, to more high-def systems. So we're really getting our shit together over here on Slightly Sideways.
We are absolutely trying. And with that, that is all we have. We are finished with our second episode here. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. If you are fans of the NBA, we do have NBA coming your way. College football, announcing schedules for conference games and everything like that. How will the COVID situation impact the NFL going forward? Will there be fans? Will it be half capacity? Who really knows what the whole situation on that is going to be? If you haven't already, follow us on our social medias, at Twitter, at Slightly Sideways, at Facebook, at Slightly Sideways Podcast, and if you have any email suggestions or things you'd like for us to talk about on the show, feel free to email us at slightlysidewayspod@gmail.com. As my co-host has said, we are on Spotify. You can find us there at Slightly Sideways Podcast. If you miss our live show every Friday on twitch.tv/disgruntledmonty, you can catch our on-demand version on Spotify, like I said, at Slightly Sideways Podcast. I have been Koenig, your host, as always, with my esteemed co-host, Corbin. Say goodnight to the people, Corbin.
Thank you all so much for listening. To all my Swedes out there, I just want to say good morning, and I hope you have a great day.
Good night, everybody.